Hi. Why is Dr. A wearing a black hat? In order to explain Hegel's idea of freedom? Well, black hats are often associated with someone being an outlaw. And being an outlaw means you're outside the law. And when you're outside the law, you do things you want to do when you want to do them. And freedom is a kind of caprice, doing what you want to do whenever you want to do it. For Hegel, this idea of freedom, doing what you want to do whenever you want to do it, is not really about freedom. We're going to try to explain what Hegel thinks freedom amounts to in this video, with the understanding that you can only really appreciate Hegel's notion of freedom if you understand the whole system. Truth is the whole for Hegel. Nevertheless, we can understand a good deal about Hegel on freedom without understanding the entire system. And that's what we're about to do. Right? In Hegel's lectures on the philosophy of history, he tells us that the essence of spirit is freedom. Now, spirit is a key term for Hegel, and we need to get some sense of what he means by spirit. But let's go about this by picking up on the contrast he uses in the philosophy of history in order to explain the idea of freedom. He compares spirit to matter. Now, what do we know about matter from Hegel's vantage point? Well, material things are pushed and pulled by forces outside of them, specifically gravity. And so when you have two material objects, they are pulled together by gravity, in the way Hegel is presenting this. And if they try to unify, they will be destroyed because they are material. And material things, they cannot occupy the same place at the same time without destroying themselves. So material things can't come together to form a unity in the way in which Hegel is presenting this. And unity is a key feature of spirit. So let's talk a little bit about spirit. The German term for spirit is Geist, and it can mean either spirit or mind. And that should give us a clue to where Hegel is coming from. Because for Hegel, mind, or reason, is extremely important, is fundamental in understanding human history and understanding how freedom can come about. So spirit is a kind of mind. It has reason. And we can think of spirit in terms of finite spirit, that is, human beings in history, or more of a divine spirit. And somehow they're intimately connected for Hegel, which is part of the big story that's hard to fully understand when you begin to get into Hegel. But we can say this about spirit, is when you understand it, you understand it is something that transcends individuals. So for example, if you think of a team, a basketball team, let's say, there is a team spirit. Each individual member is part of the team, but the team as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But the parts are not just independent parts, they also experience spirit. Spirit permeates the entire team and the members of the team. And for Hegel, this is true of societies and cultures and peoples and times. He talks about the zeitgeist, the spirit of a time. So spirit is something that can extend throughout an entire society and culture. And with this understanding of spirit, we can now begin to move on to get a better sense of where he's coming from with his idea of freedom. In order to understand where Hegel is coming from on freedom, I'd like to take a little bit of a historical detour. I'd like to talk about Rousseau for a while. Rousseau, at one point in his career, seemed to treat freedom as something that was like what Hegel described as arbitrary behavior, capriciousness. But by the time he wrote The Social Contract, he had come up with another way of thinking about freedom, and it's a very famous one. He said freedom needed to be understood as laws that we give to ourselves. Freedom is understood as laws that we give to ourselves. So let me give you an example. I love chocolate. Let's say I love chocolate, but I'm allergic to chocolate. I break out in a rash when I eat chocolate. So I know I can only eat like 2 or 3 chocolates without breaking out. So I give myself a law. I say, you know what? Don't eat more than 2 or 3 chocolates every day. And from a Rousseauian vantage point, I would be free when I obeyed myself and didn't eat more than 2 or 3 chocolates a day, as opposed to going in and eating as many chocolates as I wanted to, because that would be a kind of capriciousness. It wouldn't be any kind of thoughtful freedom, which is where Rousseau seems to be heading. And this can be carried to society as a whole, because there are times in which we can see that certain things that we're being asked to do, certain laws, appeal to us because we can understand how rational they are, that they make sense. So let me give you an example. I'm at a very busy intersection. An intersection I travel day in and day out in my car, and I stop at the red light. Now, I really don't want to stop at the red light. I'm busy, I want to get to work, whatever it is I want to do, but I stop. And I don't stop just because I'm worried about getting a ticket. I stop because I understand that if I didn't stop, I might injure somebody else, or I might injure myself, and this is not something that I would like to see happen. So I actually am free when I stop at the light, even though it might seem to be the opposite of freedom. Why? Because I'm heeding a law that I give to myself. And Hegel wants to bring us to a point, or he thinks history is bringing us to a point, in which we can live in a society in which the laws are rational. Not that every law is going to be rational, but fundamentally the structure is one in which we want laws that are rational, and they are predominantly rational, and we work towards improving the rationality of our laws. Okay, so this is one way of thinking about why freedom is not simply arbitrariness. It has to do with laws that we give to ourselves. And notice, I am not being pushed or pulled by a force outside of me when I give myself a law that I obey. Matter, the problem with matter was it was pushed and pulled by forces outside of it. But if I'm heeding a law that I give to myself, or a law that I agree with, like the traffic light, I'm not being pushed or pulled by forces outside of me. I'm heeding my own voice, and I am being self-determining. So I think it should be clearer now why matter was so problematic for Hegel, being pushed or pulled by forces outside of one, not heeding laws that we give to ourselves, or laws that society has that we would give to ourselves because we see them as rational. But there's another angle here, because unity is really important to spirit. And this other dimension has to do with self-consciousness. From a Hegelian vantage point, the thing that gives spirit its capacity to be unified in a way that matter isn't, is its ability to be aware of itself. So when I'm aware of a circle, for example, I can just be aware of the circle, or I can be aware of being aware of the circle. When I'm thinking about myself, I could just be thinking about myself, or I could be thinking about the fact that it is I who am thinking about myself. And when I think about myself, and I'm aware of thinking about myself, there's a kind of closure, a kind of unity. I am the one who is aware of myself. I am not going outside of myself. I am not appealing to the external world in this. Right now, I am the one who is aware of myself. And that gives me a unity that material things cannot experience. And from a Hegelian vantage point, this capacity for self-consciousness develops historically. As societies develop, as their laws become more rational, as reason marches on, people also become more and more self-conscious. As a matter of fact, the self-consciousness is part of the educational experience. We need to be aware of ourselves and what's going on to truly become educated. So this business with self-consciousness is something that's crucial to Hegel, and we're going to have to take up again in other videos. Let's bring together some of the elements of Hegel's idea of freedom that we've been talking about. We've learned that the essence of spirit is freedom. We've learned that spirit has its opposite in matter. Matter gets pushed and pulled by forces outside of it. It cannot achieve unity, whereas spirit can become self-determining and can achieve unity. How does spirit achieve unity? Well, it lives in a society in which laws are rational, and the individuals in that society can see that in following these laws, they're not being pushed and pulled by forces outside of them, but they are following the ways in which they would behave, even if the laws were not on the books, so to speak. And this, to reach this point, has taken a development of the history of humanity, or has taken the history of humanity to get to this point. We have gone through a huge education process, where at the beginning of history, we had the potentiality for freedom, and now we've actualized it. Why we actualize it? Because we have a state that has come into existence in the modern Western world that has achieved rational laws, or at least understands in principle that laws must be rational for citizens to be free. We've also seen that there is a dimension of this that has to do with self-consciousness, and that self-consciousness provides a kind of unity. But we've also seen that self-consciousness is an element in how we come to understand ourselves. When we are self-conscious, the concepts that we are understanding are, in a sense, understood in a deeper way. And we need self-consciousness in order to really understand what reason is about and how reason has developed throughout human history. So that's the beginning of our story of Hegel's idea of freedom. I hope you'll come back for other videos in which we will go into this and other elements of Hegel's philosophy in more detail. Thank you.